Now let's focus a little bit on attacks and threats when it comes to dealing with network security. Keep in mind, network security is quite an intimidating challenge simply because it's a moving target. New threats emerge on a regular basis as new technologies are introduced, as old technologies are enhanced, and the 12 and 13-year-olds out there find different ways to exploit weaknesses in these new technologies and new functionalities. Attacks and threats can originate, always remember this, from inside or outside the organization. And particularly the most hideous and hard to deal with are those from inside. Keep in mind, it's a scary thought, but it's the simple truth. Your biggest threat to a network is actually your administrators. They know the most about it. They know the passwords. They know the ins and outs and the personality. And administrators can become disgruntled. They can become aggravated. They can become frustrated. They can be paid by people and organizations for information. And so this is a particularly tough one to deal with. We're going to talk about outside threats predominantly in this particular video. Keep in mind, regardless of where the threat comes from, probably the best plan for dealing with any security issue is simply to maintain good data backups. Now, that goes without saying, but watch for it on the Network Plus exam. You should always have good data backups. You should test the recovery to make sure you can get your data back. But that just kind of is a foundational aspect of any kind of computer operation. Maintain good data backups. Now, there are a number of attacks and threats you just need to be vaguely familiar with for Network Plus. You don't necessarily have to memorize these, but just be able to recognize them. And they're all pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about things like malware, viruses, worms, Trojan horses, denial of service, password attacks, social engineering, a particularly hard one to deal with, spoofing, and phishing. Now let's start with malware. Malware stands for malicious software. There's a lot of different types and forms. The bottom line is this is some type of software that's designed to negatively affect operations or steal data. And in some rare instances, it's designed to actually damage the computer or the network in some major way. Viruses, this is a form of malware that performs some type of undesirable action and then replicates itself after it has been loaded or started up. There's a number of different types or forms of viruses. There's resident viruses. These things install themselves into the actual operating system areas and folders on your disk, and then they reload themselves every time you reboot the computer. Polymorphic viruses actually change their physical characteristics so as to avoid detection by our antivirus software. Variant viruses are known viruses that have simply been modified to do something else, to look a certain way, to behave a certain way. Stealth viruses are designed to hide themselves to avoid detection by the standard virus packages that we run. Macroviruses are a specialty type of virus, and they attack documents, spreadsheets, presentations, and applications like Microsoft Office and others. Anything that uses macros can be infected with the macrovirus that will take actions. Worms, they're closely related to viruses, but keep in mind a worm does not need to be activated. And usually a virus is activated, user opens a file, kicks off an executable, accesses an attachment on an email. But a worm, all it has to do is reach your computer and it will start doing damage and propagating itself wildly. Trojan horses. These are those things that appear as useful software, and they actually are useful software. However, there's a little extra something for you running in the background, and that is malware. And there's all kind of instances of this. There's all kind of helpful little things out there that you can put on your desktop to show you the time of day, stock quotes, weather. And in the background, it's actually a Trojan horse, and there's some malware doing something. Next up is denial of service. And this is where we utilize normal network services, but we abuse them to such an extreme level that the network is working so hard to provide this service that it ties up bandwidth and resources so that nothing else really useful can happen. A good example of this, denial of service, is like a ping attack. And we're going to take a look at ping later on in the course, but ping's a very natural functionality of a network, and I can ping a device and get some information back. But if I ping, say, 100,000 different pings, my network's going to work so hard at providing this ping information that it's going to extremely slow down file access for people and authentication and so forth. Social engineering. Now, this one is particularly tough to deal with because it takes advantage of human nature. If I can call someone and convince them that I'm a hardworking guy just like them and I'm in trouble, I'm out and trying to remotely connect to the office and I'm going to lose my job and, my wife's pregnant and all this other kind of stuff and what am I going to do? And I've got to have a password to get in. Most people, Their human nature is to help another person in trouble. There's a feeling of power there. There's a feeling of satisfaction. And we can take advantage of that from other humans and steal passwords, steal all kind of information that can be useful to do all sorts of things. And so a lot of times, especially in these high profile things you see in the news, you picture some computer nerd in a dark room hacking out passwords. Nah, they just social engineered and got a password and entered it. Spoofing, this is where you can intercept data and then modify it to collect information. Phishing, these are usually email based. I send you a picture that looks like, your electric company or your credit card or your bank, and I say, hey, we need to verify passwords. Give us your password and social security number, and we'll take care of you. And guess what? I just fished for information. You gave it to me, and now I'm stealing stuff. Password attacks. These are one of the most common attacks. A brute force attack is just where we have a computer program running. It's just trying thousands of millions of random words and phrases until the password is found. And guessing, or better yet, using social engineering is surprisingly easy to launch a password attack. And if I can social engineer someone to help me figure out a password, or if I can provide just enough information to make them think that I actually know the password, but I just can't remember it, then they'll give it to me and I'm in. These are the threats and attacks you just need to be generally familiar with. You could see them mentioned on the Network Plus exam.